First, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Every night she let him climb into bed, his body warm against hers, his breath steady as they drifted off together. It started with small touches, innocent, comforting. But then, something changed. Her body began to feel different, weaker, drained. She couldn't explain it, but every morning she woke up feeling worse. And months later, when she finally discovered the shocking truth, it was nothing like she had imagined. Emma Carter took a deep breath as she turned the key and stepped into her new apartment. The space was modest but modern, with warm wooden floors and large windows that bathed the room in natural light. It was hers, the first home she had ever owned after years of renting cramped spaces with roommates. She should have felt proud, excited even. But as she placed the last of her moving boxes down, a strange feeling crept over her. The silence. For the first time in years, there was no background chatter, no footsteps in the hallway, no laughter. From a shared living room, just an empty apartment and the distant hum of city traffic outside. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on her. She had longed for independence, but she hadn't expected loneliness to come with it. By the next morning, she had made up her mind. She needed companionship, a new friend. A week later, Emma found herself. At first, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Every night she let him climb into bed, his body warm against hers, his breath steady as they drifted off together. It started with small touches, innocent, comforting. But then, something changed. Her body began to feel different, weaker, drained. She couldn't explain it, but every morning she woke up feeling worse. And months later, when she finally discovered the shocking truth, it was nothing like she had imagined. Emma Carter took a deep breath as she turned the key and stepped into her new apartment. The space was modest but modern, with warm wooden floors and large windows that bathed the room in natural light. It was hers, the first home she had ever owned after years of renting cramped spaces with roommates. She should have felt proud, excited even. But as she placed the last of her moving boxes down, a strange feeling crept over her. The silence. For the first time in years, there was no background chatter, no footsteps in the hallway, no laughter. From a shared living room, just an empty apartment and the distant hum of city traffic outside. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on her. She had longed for independence, but she hadn't expected loneliness to come with it. By the next morning, she had made up her mind. She needed companionship, a new friend. A week later, Emma found herself at Sun. Now she had space. Now she could provide a home. As she moved past the kennels, she noticed a German shepherd sitting quietly in the back of his enclosure. While the other dogs barked for attention, he simply watched, his deep brown eyes meeting hers, unreadable, but calm. Emma knelt down, extending her hand. Max hesitated, then slowly approached, sniffing her fingers before pressing his head lightly against her palm. "I'll take him," she said without hesitation. Settling in, she had read that rescue dogs sometimes took weeks to adjust. But to her surprise, Max settled in much faster than she expected. Within days, he had found his favorite spot on the couch and learned the exact time Emma came home from work. He was quiet, observant, and fiercely loyal. At night, she set up a dog bed near her bedroom door, giving him his own space. The first night, he curled up on the bed obediently, his body rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. The first time. On the third night, something changed. Emma woke up to warmth against her legs. Confused, she shifted slightly and realized Max was on the bed. She frowned. She was sure she had left him on his bed near the door. "Max," she murmured sleepily. The dog lifted his head, looking at her with those same calm brown eyes, before sighing and slowly climbing off the bed, retreating back to his own spot. Emma shook her head with a small smile before drifting back to sleep. A habit forms. By the pie. Fifth night, Max was back. This time, he had waited until she was fully asleep before making his move. She sighed. "Seriously, Max," Emma groaned, rubbing her face. She should make him go back to his own bed. She should. Max gave a contented sigh, resting his head back down. And just like that, the habit was formed. First, it was subtle. Emma would wake up feeling a little groggy, rubbing her temples as a dull headache settled at the base of her skull. Nothing too concerning, just the usual morning fog, she told herself. Maybe she needed to cut back on late-night Netflix binges. But as the days passed, the grogginess didn't fade. It worsened. She began waking up feeling drained, as though she hadn't slept at all. Her limbs felt heavier, her movements sluggish. By midday, a wave of exhaustion would hit, forcing her to lean against her desk at work, blinking hard to stay focused. Her boss even commented on it during a meeting. "You okay, Emma? You look exhausted." She forced a smile. Just didn't sleep well last night. Except she had. She had gone to bed at her usual time, curled under the covers with Max at her feet, his steady breathing lulling her to sleep. And yet every morning, she felt worse. Max's strange behavior. At first, she chalked it up to stress. Work had been demanding lately. Maybe her body was just reacting to the pressure. But then she noticed something that made her pause. Max wasn't himself either. Normally lively and alert, he now seemed sluggish, sleeping more during the day, moving slower when she took him on walks. He still followed her everywhere, still curled up on her bed at night, but his energy was different. And then, there was the breathing. At night, Max's breath sounded heavier, almost labored. Sometimes he let out small coughs, barely noticeable, but enough for Emma to register in her half-asleep state. Other times he would give a low whimper, shifting restlessly before settling down again. Was he sick? Emma knelt beside him one evening, running her hands through his fur. He felt warm, but not hot. His nose was damp, his eyes clear. No fever, no immediate signs of illness. "Maybe you caught a cold, buddy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Or maybe you're just getting used to the new place." She convinced herself it was nothing serious. But when Sarah saw her a few days later, she wasn't convinced. Sarah's concern. Sarah Mitchell had been Emma's best friend since college. They had seen each other through breakups, job changes, and everything in between. So when Sarah walked into their usual coffee shop and stared at Emma, her brows knitting together in concern, Emma knew she was about to get an earful. "You look like..." Emma rolled her eyes. "Good morning to you too." Sarah didn't smile. She took a sip of her coffee, still watching Emma like a mother about to scold her child. "I'm serious. Have you looked at yourself? You've lost weight. Your skin looks pale. Are you eating properly?" Emma frowned, running a hand through her hair. I guess I haven't had much of an appetite lately." Sarah set her cup down with a thud. "Emma, that's not normal. And the dark circles under your eyes, you look like you haven't slept in weeks." "I have been sleeping," Emma muttered, stirring her latte absently. "That's the weird thing. I should feel rested, but I wake up exhausted. Like bone-deep exhaustion." Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Have you gone to a doctor?" Emma scoffed. "Sarah, it's probably just work stress." Sarah didn't look convinced. "Work stress doesn't make you lose weight, feel like a zombie, and look like a damn ghost." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Wait, didn't you say Max hasn't been himself?" "Either?" Emma hesitated. "Yeah, he's been acting weird too. Sleeping more, breathing a little heavier." Sarah pursed her lips. "And that doesn't seem suspicious to you? You and your dog both feeling like crap?" Emma's stomach twisted slightly. She hadn't thought about it like that. Sure, she had noticed Max acting differently, but she had assumed it was just coincidence. Dogs get tired too, right? But what if it wasn't a coincidence? What if something was actually wrong? Brushing it off. Despite Sarah's concern, Emma still hesitated to make an appointment. The idea of going to a doctor, getting poked and prodded just to be told it was stress, didn't exactly sound appealing. So she tried to brush it off. She made small changes, went to bed earlier, drank more water, took Max on extra long walks, thinking maybe fresh air would help both of them feel better, but nothing worked. If anything, she started feeling worse. Some mornings she woke up with a dull pressure in her chest, like someone had been pressing down on it all night. Other times her head spun when she stood up too quickly. Her exhaustion started affecting everything. She missed texts from friends. She started zoning out at work, barely making it through meetings without fighting the urge to rest her head on the desk. Even her appetite had disappeared entirely. It was as if her body was shutting down bit by bit, and Max, he was barely moving. Some mornings, instead of his usual enthusiastic stretches and tail wags when she woke up, he would stay curled up, only lifting his head slightly when she called his name. A flicker of fear settled in Emma's gut. Something was definitely wrong. The breaking point. One night, Emma collapsed onto the couch, utterly drained. Max lay at her feet, unmoving, his breathing slow and heavy. She felt her own chest rise and fall in sync with his, and for a brief moment, the strangest thought crossed her mind. What if we're both sick? What if it's something in this apartment? Except Sarah had been right. It was too much of a coincidence that both she and Max had started deteriorating at the exact same time. And as she lay there, eyelids growing heavy, she swore she heard something, a faint hissing noise coming from the direction of the heater. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned her head slightly, eyes locking onto the metal vent near the floor. The apartment had central heating, something she hadn't paid much attention to. Had it always made that sound? She wasn't sure. But as she drifted into unconsciousness, one thought kept echoing in her mind. Something is wrong. Emma sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual as she glanced at Max in the back seat. He lay curled up, his head resting against the seat, his breathing slow and steady. Normally, a car ride would excite him. He'd stick his head out the window, ears flapping in the wind, tail wagging. But today, he barely reacted. She pressed her foot to the gas pedal and headed towards Dr. Robert Hayes' clinic, hoping for answers. The veterinary clinic was small but well kept, the scent of disinfectant lingering in the air as Emma walked through the glass doors with Max by her side. The receptionist, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes, smiled warmly. "Hey there, Emma and Max." Emma had been coming here for the past month to get Max's initial vaccinations and checkups after adopting him, but today felt different. "Of course you can go right in," Mara said, nodding toward the familiar examination room down the hall. Emma swallowed hard and led Max inside. Dr. Robert Hayes was a tall man in his 40s with sharp blue eyes and an air of calm confidence. He had a no-nonsense approach to his work, something Emma appreciated. He didn't sugarcoat things, but he also never made pet owners panic unnecessarily. As he entered the room, he gave her a small nod. "Emma, what's going on with Max?" She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "He's been different, sleeping more, less energy, sometimes breathing heavier than usual. And I don't know, something just feels off." Dr. Hayes knelt beside Max, running his hands gently along the dog's body, feeling for anything abnormal. Max barely reacted, which made Emma's stomach twist. "Has he been eating normally?" Hayes asked. Emma hesitated. "Mostly, but not as much as before, and he's just not himself." The vet nodded, continuing his exam. He checked Max's eyes, ears, gums, listened to his heartbeat, took his temperature. The room was quiet except for the steady tick-tick-tick of the wall clock. Finally, Hayes stood up, his brows furrowed slightly. "Max shows signs of mild toxicity," he said. Emma's stomach dropped. "Toxicity? From what?" "I don't know yet," Hayes admitted. "His vitals are stable, but his fatigue, sluggishness, and minor respiratory changes suggest low-level poisoning. It's not severe. If it were, he'd be much worse by now. But something in his system isn't right." Emma felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. She had been worried about Max, but what really unnerved her was the fact that she felt the same way. Her hands tightened into fists. "I've been feeling sick too," she blurted out. Dr. Hayes' head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "I've been exhausted for weeks," she admitted. "Waking up more tired than when I went to bed. Headaches, weakness, just drained. And it's been getting worse. But Max and I both started feeling bad around the same time." Dr. Hayes narrowed his eyes. He leaned back slightly, arms crossed over his chest as he considered her words. "That's not a coincidence," he said finally. "You and Max share the same space. If both of you are experiencing symptoms, it's likely something environmental." Emma's heartbeat quickened. "You mean something in my apartment?" Dr. Hayes nodded. "It's possible." He tapped his fingers against the side of the exam table, thinking. If it was food poisoning, I'd expect digestive issues. If it was seasonal allergies, the symptoms would come and go. But this sounds more like prolonged exposure to something. Emma swallowed. The idea of something in her home, something unseen, something quietly making both her and Max sick, made her skin prickle. "What should I do?" she asked, voice quieter now. "For Max, I'll run some blood tests to check for any toxins," Hayes said. "But for you, you should see a doctor, get blood work done. If your symptoms match his, that could give us a huge clue about what's happening." Emma nodded, though the thought of going to the doctor made her uneasy. She had assumed her exhaustion was stress, had convinced herself it would go away if she just got more rest. But if it wasn't, waiting for answers. Emma sat in the waiting area while Dr. Hayes took Max to draw blood. Her foot tapped against the floor, her mind racing. What if this was serious? What if she had been slowly poisoning herself without even knowing? Sarah's voice echoed in her head. "You and your dog both feeling sick." "That's not normal, Emma." She exhaled sharply and pulled out her phone. After a few seconds of hesitation, she dialed her doctor's office. A receptionist answered. "Hi, this is Emma Carter," she said, shifting in her seat. "I'd like to schedule an appointment. Something's not right and I think I need some tests done." She felt a little ridiculous saying it out loud. She wasn't a hypochondriac. She had never been the type to run to the doctor over a little fatigue. But this wasn't normal. She needed to find out what was happening to her body, and she needed to find out fast. By the time Emma and Max left the vet clinic, the sun was beginning to set. The air was cool, the sky a pale gold fading into dusky blue. Max walked beside her, his steps slow but steady. She opened the car door for him, watching as he climbed in with less enthusiasm than usual. The drive home was quiet. For the first time since moving into her new apartment, Emma felt uneasy about returning. As she unlocked the door and stepped inside, a thought nagged at her. If Dr. Hayes was right, if something in her home was making her and Max sick, what was it? She turned on the lights. Everything looked normal. Nothing seemed out of place. But the uneasiness lingered. That night, as she lay in bed with Max curled at her feet, her body felt heavier than ever. Her eyelids drooped, her limbs tingled, and as she drifted into an exhausted, almost dreamlike sleep, the last thing she registered was the faint, barely audible hissing coming from the heat vent. Emma's exhaustion had started as an inconvenience, a grogginess she could shake off with a strong cup of coffee. But now, it was a constant weight pressing down on her, like an invisible force she could no longer ignore. Emma. Her head jerked up.